I learned what humiliation sounds like the night my wife's ventilator quit humming and an HOA notice fluttered on our mailbox like it owned the deed to our air. She, our neighborhood's Karen in a navy blazer, called the cops on my garage for obstruction, and by the time they arrived, the governor's name would end up in the paperwork. The officers read my stamped ceasework filing like scripture while she smiled as if that proved her point. Let me take you back to where the first wire came loose. The hum in our bedroom thinned to a wire, then snapped. The ventilator's screen blinked once flat blue as if the whole circuit had sighed and given up. I was out of bed before my feet remembered socks crossing cool tile then the colder concrete of the garage. The console lights stuttered alive. Battery backup caught with a reluctant groan, and Lena's pulse ox began its chirp again, fast, sharp a metronome that had lost patience. Still breathing, I asked more to myself than her. "I'm fine," she whispered, her voice just enough to travel across the house. "You're the one panting." I bent to the console, pressing the panel's corners like prayer beads. Grids clean. This, I tapped the screen. This wasn't a fault. The trellis camera feed hiccuped at 10:13 p.m. The frame jumped froze, then blacked out for 60 seconds. A 1-minute blind spot that shouldn't exist. When the feed resumed, the vines around the enclosure swayed as if brushed by a passing hand. The keyed latch was tilted a degree off-center like a polite hand had been impolite. By morning, Florida's late summer humidity pressed against the glass. Sprinklers whispered. Tree frogs stitched the dawn together. At the curb, Colleen Durrett appeared as punctual as sunrise. Clipboard tucked to her side, smile fixed like a straight edge. She paced toward my mailbox. I opened the door before she reached it. Something wrong with the mail. Not the mail, she said. Her pen scratched paper. The structure in your yard. It's a backup power enclosure. Her smile widened just enough to signal disapproval. Front yard, visual uniformity is part of our bylaws. She slid the notice into the box. I pulled it out and scanned the lines. Violation, non-conforming exterior structure. Deadline for removal, 14 days. Uniformity, I repeated. That's the word. She angled her head. We all agreed to covenants when we bought here, Marcus. This isn't personal. It powers my wife's ventilator. Colleen's pen tapped her clipboard the rhythm faster than Lena's pulse ox. Rules don't make exceptions for sympathy. They're meant to protect property values. Back in the garage, I opened last year's email thread. Subject line, medical exemption approved. The HOA secretary's name sat clearly in the CC field. I printed it, the laser jet smell, sharp as citrus. I laid the exemption beside the violation notice on the workbench. 2 witnesses, side by side, waiting for cross-examination. Lena wheeled in, softly blanket around her shoulders. She eyed the papers. They forget already. They'd prefer I did. She reached out and tapped the exemption. Don't let them rewrite history. Sun climbed higher. At 9, Colleen returned clipboard tucked under her arm again. I met her at the front walk. This, she said, gesturing at the vines around the enclosure, is a box. It's emergency power to a ventilator, I answered. My voice steadied itself on the syllables. Her smile didn't shift. You saw the exemption, I said. That was last year. Policies evolve. And power doesn't. Behind her, a neighbor with a dog slowed. The leash tightened as the man bent his head, pretending interest in the pavement. I caught the glance he stole at us. Gossip spreads faster than fire ants in this place. Colleen closed her clipboard. You'll need to file for removal, or we'll proceed. I let the silence hang until she turned. The dog walker shuffled away the dog's collar, jingling a question. That night, I returned to the garage. The console's breaker log showed a disconnect at 10:14 p.m. The trellis cam swore it was still live then. 60 seconds of disagreement, just enough space for a key and a hand. I wrote the times down on a yellow pad, the pencil lead trembling only because the air vent clicked on. From the bedroom, Lena called softly, You'll figure it out. I stared at the pad at the words manual interruption and whispered back, I have to. The envelope looked like it had been designed to win awards for paper weight. Off-white embossed return address, my name in a serif font that tried to be kind. I slit the top with the edge of a house key and slid out a single page framed by a tasteful border. Final enforcement, I read aloud. 72 hours to remove the enclosure. Lena lifted her head from the pillow in the sunroom. 72 hours, she echoed, like tasting something that had gone bad. They know what it's for. They know. I held the page by its corners. The stock didn't bend. They're counting on the look of it to make me fold. My phone vibrated. The HOA portal badge flashed red. I thumbed it open. Agenda, update, emergency clause proposal, emergency clause, I said. That's fast work for an HOA that can't return emails. What's it do? Lena asked. Whatever they say it does, until someone reads the bylaws aloud. I set the letter on the counter like it might leave a ring. I'm going to take a walk. Mask, she said automatically, habit from hospital days. Back pocket. I answered and kissed the air near her temple. I'll be close. The mild winter sun made the sidewalk glare a little. The air had that clean-edged cool Florida gives you for 6 weeks if you're polite to it. Dog walkers nodded, HOA decals winked on rear windows, and mulch deliveries sat in perfect plastic bales at the ends of immaculate drives. On Alia Circle, the yellow caution tape cut a bright line across a wooden ramp. Someone had written pending modification approval in tidy block letters on a sign taped to the window. I snapped a photo, the shutter sound ridiculous in the quiet. The door opened halfway. A woman in her 60s looked out with the practiced caution of someone who'd learned doors are negotiations. I'm Marcus, I said, keeping my hands where she could see them. On Willow Bend. I'm looking into... Patterns. Patterns, she repeated, and her mouth pulled to one side. You mean the tape? Who's recovering? I asked. My husband. L4 to S1 fusion. He can't do stairs yet. She glanced at the ramp. They said the stain doesn't match the porch trim. I told them the porch trim doesn't match my husband's spine. I almost smiled. Do you have their notice? She passed a folded page through the gap. I read non-conforming exterior alteration. Handrails to be removed pending approval. He fell, once, she said softly. We put the rails back up. I called their office. It goes to voicemail that thanks me for caring about community harmony. May I take a picture, I asked. I'm documenting. Dates, language, all of it. Please, she said. Make it worth the tape. Click. I took a second shot of the sign, then a close-up of the signature line. Unsigned. My pen found the margin of my pocket notebook. Unsigned notice, Alia ramp today's date. On Sycamore Court, the mechanical chairlift had been uninstalled with the kind of thoroughness that made denial easy. Only anchor scars remained in the concrete steps, pale ovals like thumbprints fading in the sun. A teenage boy carried grocery bags up those steps one by one, breathing through his mouth. An older man watched from the doorway, leaning more weight on the frame than he wanted to show. Afternoon, I said. Marcus, from Willow Bend. I'm... Looking into patterns, the man finished, half smiling. We heard. He tapped the railing. They called it a mechanical obstruction. Said it disrupted visual uniformity. How long since it was removed, I asked. 3 months. He exhaled. My stroke was 4. I'm sorry. I keep hearing you can appeal, he said, tone neutral as a ledger. But the hearing dates move like mirages. Do you have their language, I asked. He pulled a sleeve of paper from a plastic folder. I scanned a paragraph, and the phrase I'd been waiting for jumped visible mechanical obstruction. I photographed it and handed the paper back. Is there anyone on the board who listens? He asked. Terrence, I said. Sometimes. When he remembers he has a last name. The boy set the last bag down and looked at me. Do they get in trouble for making rules that hurt people? They get meetings, I said. We'll see what those do. Back in my garage, the whiteboard took a new column, Patterns. I printed and pinned 2 neighbor statements, my renewal receipt from 45 days before exemption expiry, and a screenshot of Colleen's emergency clause agenda post. The cork strip filled like a timeline that had been hiding in plain sight. Lena rolled her chair just inside the doorway, careful not to catch the threshold lip. How many is a pattern? Legally or morally, I said. Both, she answered. 2 is a pattern morally, I said, tapping a pin into Alia's photo. Legally, we'll find out. I slid the bylaw binder to the center of the bench and turned to subsection G. Medical exemptions must be refiled no later than 30 days prior to expiration. I checked my calendar. Submitted 45 days early, I said, tapping the renewal receipt with a knuckle. Lena watched my knuckle, not the paper. You're vibrating. Adrenaline, I said. And the coffee. Don't let them write this as a temper problem, she said. Let them write it as a logbook. That's the plan. My phone chimed. The HOA app badge pulsed. I opened it. Final enforcement, 24 hours. I read. The frame around the header was a tasteful wreath motif. They hired a graphic designer for the tone of this threat. Frame, pretty, message, ugly, Lena said. Classic. I set the phone next to the stack neighbor statements, bylaw page, renewal receipt, agenda screenshot. I took a photo of the pile itself, then one of the pile's shadows for no reason except that shadows tell the truth about shape. Marcus Lena said quietly. Yeah. Come sit for 5 minutes. I will. I didn't move. One more thing. At noon, the trellis cam sent a motion alert that cut through the garage like a dropped wrench. I thumbed it open. The frame held steady on the vines, then jittered as a shoulder passed close. A blue polo sleeve flashed across the lower corner, the knit catching a square of sun. The feed stuttered, regained focus, and showed empty air as if no sleeve had ever been attached to a person. Blue polo, I murmured. What Lena asked. Someone hugged my vines. I slid the phone into my pocket, slow and deliberate, like holstering a thought, and they were wearing the uniform of a maintenance brochure. Call Byron, she asked. Soon, I said. First, I'm adding a lock to the story. I picked up a marker and wrote Blue Polo No Tools visible under patterns. The cap clicked back on with the neat finality of a notary stamp. Outside, a sprinkler head hissed to life and ticked across the lawn, washing the enclosure in a clean arc of water as if to rinse off what just brushed past it. I dialed Byron from the garage bench that had become both drafting table and courtroom desk. The fan spun slow overhead, stirring pencil shavings in the mug I still called my coffee cup. He answered on the second ring, his voice as regular as a metronome. Document everything. I already started, I said. But they've escalated. Final enforcement in 24 hours. I need a record clean enough to pass cross-examination. You don't need a speech, he replied. You need chain of custody. On my laptop, the HOA portal glowed too bright for midday. A new line had appeared on the board's agenda. Executive Authority Clarification proposed. The word clarification did the work of a bulldozer in a porcelain shop. I clicked over to my email archive. Headers stacked in a neat column like fence posts. I printed them page after page of subject lines, timestamps, and server stamps. When the first page rolled out warm into my hand, I held it up like scripture. Lena wheeled in blanket around her shoulders. More paper evidence, I said. Server confirmed the exemption was approved last year. Date time sender CC field. Does it matter, she asked. It matters when it's stamped. Judges like stamps. She raised an eyebrow. Or brothers who became judges. Byron's voice still hummed in my ear from the call. Paper can't blush, he said. Make them blush instead. My search tab blinked. Florida Contractor Registry. I typed Danforth Maintenance. The screen loaded a blank result under electrical license. Got you, I murmured. I hit screenshot saved, added a timestamp overlay, then exported to a USB drive with the label Evidence 001 in my own block handwriting. The drive's red LED blinked once like a heartbeat. Byron's voice. Print it, too. I did. The printer spat the image onto cheap office stock. I laid my palm over it. The ink was still tacky, but the message was dry, not licensed for electrical work. At dusk, the side gate creaked. Terrence Malloy stood there, hands in his pockets, HOA treasurer badge clipped to his belt but hidden under his shirt hem. Terrence, I said, stepping outside. He avoided my eyes. No board vote, he whispered. What do you mean, the emergency clause? Colleen drafted it herself. No quorum, no signatures. He tugged his key loop. It jangled like loose change. Can you prove that I asked? He shook his head. I shouldn't even be here. I scribbled the time and his words in the margin of my notebook. 7:42 p.m. Terrence. No, board vote. Terrence, I said softly. Do you want this place to stand or to rot? He glanced toward the streetlight, then back at me. I'll text you something later. Don't reply. He walked off, shoulders tight, leaving the gate ajar. When I went back inside, Lena was waiting. What did he say? That Colleen made her own rules. No vote. Then that's it, she said. You've got them. Not yet. But the screenshot, the headers, his whisper, they line up. I flipped the notebook shut. The vines outside brushed the enclosure, nudging the new pinhole camera I'd mounted that afternoon. If someone reached in again, they'd meet their future self in 1080p. The next morning, the garage smelled of toner and graphite. My folder grew heavier by the hour. Email headers, server confirmation, contractor registry screenshot, handwritten log with Terrence's words. Byron called back without preamble. Chain of custody, USB drive, labeled and dated. Printed copies with hash values stapled to the front. Good, he said. And a witness Terrence. But he's scared. Fear is admissible, Byron said. Just not persuasive. You'll need more. Working on it. Keep the receipts, he said, and hung up. That night, the HOA portal pinged again. The new line sat bold on the screen. Executive Authority Clarification proposed. I stared at the word clarification until the letters blurred. My reflection in the screen looked less like me and more like the man they wanted me to be, combative, unneighborly, difficult. Lena rolled in. "What's wrong? They're moving the goalposts." Again. She wheeled closer, resting her hand on mine. "Then we mark where the posts used to be." The vines rustled against the enclosure outside, nudging the lens. The camera's red LED winked in the dark. The hold music was tinny enough to make me miss silence. I paced with the phone to my ear, waiting for the city clerk to pick up. Through the kitchen window, I saw movement in the yard. A man in a maintenance vest bent over the enclosure. A second later came the pop of a staple gun. When I stepped outside, the paper flapped against the vines like a flag designed by smugness itself. The ink read "Final Enforcement" in a font that tried too hard. The red seal shone in the Florida sun, cocky and official. I held the phone away from my ear. The clerk's voice buzzed faintly. "City Records Office, please hold." "I am holding," I said, but not to her. The paper snapped in the breeze as if agreeing with Colleen. That evening, my phone chimed. A message from Terrence. One photo, an internal memo header, blurred from being folded too many times. The text clear enough, though. Preemptive aesthetic enforcement where exemption compliance has lapsed or is unverifiable. I read the sentence twice, then again, until the word unverifiable felt like a splinter in the mouth. Lena glanced over. "What's unverifiable?" "Our exemption," I said. "They are trying to make the word work harder than the truth." She tilted her head. "Lying with posture." "Exactly," I said. The next day, I walked through the HOA office doors. Fluorescent tubes buzzed overhead. The faint odor of sanitizer clung to the carpet that swallowed each step like it was trying to keep secrets. Colleen sat behind the reception desk, though she wasn't the receptionist. Clipboard in front of her smile arranged like an answer key. "Marcus," she said pleasantly, "we're streamlining processes. That what the seal is called now?" I asked. Her smile did not waver. "It's to keep things clear." "Clarity doesn't need a staple gun," I said. She folded her hands. "You'll want to address this at the next meeting. In writing, of course." "Of course," I echoed. We both understood that in her vocabulary in writing meant in triplicate lost on arrival. That night, my dining table became an evidence desk. Terrence arrived just past 10, glancing over both shoulders before he came inside. He set a folder down, edges damp from his hands. "I can't keep this," he whispered. I slid it open. Inside, a blank vote log lines waiting for signatures that never came. An unsigned memo, the one I'd already seen as a blurry photo. A work log with my address circled in neat pen strokes. "Where did you get these?" I asked. "Copied them when Colleen left her office unlocked," he said. His voice cracked on the word unlocked. "You realize this puts you—" "I know." His hands twitched at his sides. "Just don't say my name." I met his eyes. He looked like a man discovering that his spine weighed less than he feared and more than he wanted. "Thank you," I said. He nodded once and left without finishing the water I'd poured. I worked until 3:14 a.m. I scanned each page, naming the files with dates precise enough to make future lawyers nod. I hashed them, logged the strings, and copied everything to an encrypted USB. On the label, I wrote the time with the Sharpie Steady block letters 3:14 a.m. The green LED blinked back at me. For the first time all day, something obedient. Before shutting down, I stepped outside with my phone. The red seal clung to the enclosure, its corners curling slightly in the humidity. I photographed it close up, then wide enough to show the vines recoiling as if ashamed. Inside again, I laid the photos next to the memo scans. My garage smelled of toner and tired resolve. The following afternoon, I logged into the HOA portal. A new message thread waited. Final enforcement, 24 hours. The font looked rehearsed, the frame around it a decorative scroll. Next to the line sat a blinking cursor pulsing with the word acknowledge. Lena rolled her chair beside me. "What happens if you don't click it?" "I find out," I said. "You're sure?" No, I admitted. We both stared at the cursor. It blinked in perfect rhythm with the fan overhead. I folded my hands, breathed once, and pushed the mouse away. The cursor blinked anyway. The folder felt heavier than paper ought to. I set it on the counter at the state licensing board, palm flat, as if weight could argue for me. "This is unlicensed electrical work on a ventilator backup," I said. The woman behind the plexiglass wore a lanyard with a name I'd already seen in my searches. Tanya, mid-50s, reading glasses on a chain. Her pen clicked once, then twice, and didn't stop moving. Single-family residence, she asked. Yes. Manufacturer and code class on the backup, hospital-grade inverter municipal code, 2021, compliant. Install notes are in the packet. She slid the folder toward herself, fan of pages spreading under her hands. I watched her mouth turn down, not in doubt, but in concentration. You have images of the contractor at the panel, Tanya asked. I passed the printed photos through the slot. Danforth Maintenance, blue polo, bare hands on the junction. License number, none for electrical, I said. Registry screenshot date stamped included. Her pen paused. You said ventilator, as in active medical exemption approved last year. Renewal filed 45 days early. Their unverifiable is a word problem, not a fact. She nodded once, decisive. Okay. She pulled a crimson stamp from a tray, thumped it hard enough to make the plexiglass rattle, and dated the top page. Formal request for investigation. You'll get a case number by email. A deputy at the end of the counter watched me as if my name had already been called in a courtroom I hadn't entered. I straightened the breath in my chest the way you do when you've told the truth and now have to wait for it to work. Tanya stacked the packet, tapped it square, and slid a receipt back under the glass. Keep everything as is. No alterations to your surveillance. Understood. Mr. Dwight, she added as I turned. If anyone approaches that enclosure, do not engage. Document. I've been documenting since they stapled a smile to a red seal, I said. She almost smiled back. Then you're ahead. Outside, the Tallahassee sun came off the concrete in pale heat. Dust hung in the air like a decision not yet made. I held the stamped request under my arm as if it radiated, and for the first time in weeks I felt taller than my problem, if only by an inch. By the time I pulled into Briar Glen, the HOA portal had already pinged. I ignored it long enough to park and walk the side path. The vines lifted in a breeze innocent as laundry on a line. My new floodlights loomed above the enclosure, motion sensors angled like patient eyes. The cage I'd installed fit clean, powder-coated steel over calm machinery. Back inside the garage, I laid the receipt and my copy of the stamped request on the bench. LED strips lit every surface like a clean affidavit. I opened the Trellis camera app, scrubbed back to noon, and watched a white van creep past the curb like it had forgotten what gas pedals were for. No logo, no tools on the seat, windows just reflective enough to pretend to be shy. Too slow, I said to the glass. Talking to your equipment again, Lena asked from the doorway. Talking to the people who think they aren't in the frame, I said. Tanya filed it. She stamped it like it owed her money. That's good, Lena said, and her voice loosened something in my shoulders. Does it stop them? It slows them, I said. Sometimes that's all safety needs. Evening came in layers. The frog chorus, the sprinkler tick, a neighbor's grill exhaling sweet smoke. I was typing an email to Byron, subject line filed. Stamped. When someone knocked on the garage's side door. 3 raps official cadence. I opened it to 2 officers who wore the end of their shift on their faces. Evening, the taller one said. We got a call about a complaint of obstruction in a garage, from whom I asked. Complainant declined to be identified, he said, which is how anonymity does its best work. Come in, I said, stepping back. You're on camera. They took in the bench, the binders, the LED orderliness. The shorter officer eyed the folder open to a photo of the blue polo sleeve. What's the obstruction, he asked. Paperwork, I said. I filed some. He almost grinned, then remembered where he was. The taller one cleared his throat. We're just here to see that nothing dangerous is happening. Danger is exactly why you're here, I said, and slid the stamped request and the ceasework draft across the bench. State Licensing Board. Case pending. I've been advised not to alter or remove anything. That includes the cage around a medically exempt system. The shorter officer's whistle was almost soundless. You did this yourself. I designed these for the county hospital, I said. This is the home version. The taller one scanned the header, the stamp, the date. We're satisfied, he said finally. You mind if we note that we saw the documentation? Write it like you saw a library, I said. Quiet and full of records. He nodded once. They left without the usual radio chatter. When the door closed, the garage felt cooler by 5 degrees. My phone chimed Tanya's email. Case number 542187, opened. Investigator assigned. Do not alter surveillance or documentation. The line about no alterations, now in bold, read like a benediction. My folder had stopped being mine and become state property, and for once I liked the sound of that. I forwarded the email to Byron, attached the cop call sheet. His reply came back in a minute. Good. Keep your tone flat. Let their words do the climbing. I sat down at the bench and let myself breathe all the way to the bottom. The lights made everything look reasonable. The cage over the enclosure looked less like a defense and more like architecture. If a neighbor had walked by right then, they might have called it tasteful. Another ping. The HOA portal again. I thumbed it open. Emergency clause hearing governor to attend. Governor, I said out loud like testing a strange spice. Lena's chair hummed across the tile. Is that good or bad? It's attention, I said. And attention is combustible. Depends who lights the match. My cursor hovered over the link longer than I breathed. The screen held still. Outside, a car door shut a block away, then another. Quiet returned to its post. I let the link sit because for once it could wait its turn. I turned off the bench light last the way you do when you want a room to know you left it in order. The morning after the meeting, the HOA site loaded with an unusual speed as if the server had slept better than anyone. A single paragraph sat at the top like a door left half open. Resignation, Colleen Durrett. No apology, only absence. The timestamp blinked 6:02 a.m., like she'd handed in her keys before the coffee maker warmed. In the garage, the console hummed its modest hymn. Diagnostics ran their green ladder and returned one word I hadn't trusted in months. Stable. I let the fan blow across my shoulders and waited for the urge to check again. It didn't come. I checked anyway. Byron's text arrived the way his advice did, short enough to carry in a pocket. Balance restored. I stared at the two words until they felt heavier than their length. A gavel hadn't made them true. Paper had. Terrence had scheduled a small open session at the clubhouse for late afternoon interim policy readout. I walked in to find folding tables arranged in 2 nervous rows and a pot of weak coffee trying its best. Attendance was thin, a dozen neighbors, the ramp couple, the chairlift family, a man who always wore a fishing hat to meetings as if hoping a lake would appear. The carpet here still tried to swallow footsteps. It would need to learn to let them ring. Terrence stood at the far table, sleeves rolled once the edge of a coffee stain on the top sheet of his stack. He looked like a man who had located the middle setting on a dimmer switch and found it suited the room. "Thanks for coming," he said. "We'll keep it short." The door opened and a city inspector stepped in wearing a navy jacket with reflective tape on the cuffs. He introduced himself as Wells and held up a clipboard like a passport. "Quick checks today," he said, "and tags where tags are due." We moved outside in a quiet procession. The late sun slanted across the walkways, laying bright bars across the grass. At the side yard, Wells crouched by the enclosure cage running a small flashlight along the conduit lines. The vines had thickened in the heat. They curled like patient hands not hiding so much as framing. "Nice work," he said without looking up. "Powder coat, good spacing." "Who installed?" "I did," I said. He nodded, the beam pausing on the bonding jumper. "Code class 2021. Municipal compliant," I answered. "Hospital-grade inverter. Surge-protected loop with tamper logging." He thumbed a page on his clipboard and glanced at me for the first time. "You wrote that sentence like it was engraved. I've had practice." He stood, peeled the backing from a small rectangle and pressed a green tag onto the base plate of the cage. The adhesive squeaked a tiny ceremony. "Read it out," Terrence asked, half-smile. Wells' obliged tone, almost cheerful. "Verified medical exemption, do not tamper." He nodded at me. "Consider yourself tagged." The ramp couple exhaled at the same time. "I didn't know you could hear a written policy leave someone's chest, but you can." The chairlift family stood a little straighter. Wells made notes, real pen, real paper, and moved on to the next address. Terrence cleared his throat. "Back inside," he said. In the clubhouse, he set the coffee-stained stack on the table and lifted the first page. "This is the interim policy draft," he said. "Third-party review for all medical exemptions. Refiling every 2 years, not 1. Clear timelines published on the portal. Appeals must be scheduled in writing within 14 days. He glanced up to gauge the room. Vendors must provide license numbers on every work order. No verbal authorizations. He let the phrase hang. It didn't need to be underlined. Everyone saw the ghost in it. 2 years, the man in the fishing hat asked. "That's longer than I expected. We want stability," Terrence said, "for the people who need it most." Byron leaned against the back wall, arms crossed, watching the words find their places. He didn't speak until Terrence finished reading the last line. "Put the filing dates in bold," he said, "and add a sentence about who to contact when the clock stutters." Terrence scribbled it down, then looked at me. "Thoughts?" "Publish the green tag language," I said. verbatim. People need to see it before they need it. A few neighbors nodded. Someone poured coffee. It smelled like the pot deserved retirement. The room felt different in the small ways that matter, the particular silence of people deciding they might trust a system again. We wrapped fast. No applause, no speech. Terrence gathered the drafts, placing the stained page on top like a flag of imperfection. He approached me as the last neighbor left. "You good?" he asked. "For now," I said. "Ask me again at midnight." He smiled without showing teeth. "We'll get a better coffee pot." He glanced toward Byron, and a bigger font for bold. Byron pushed off the wall and joined us. "Make sure the portal accepts attachments up to 10 megabytes, he said. "People scan crooked. Files get big." He put a hand on my shoulder with an economy that felt like permission. "Go sit in your yard. Let the tag do some of the watching." On the walk home, sprinklers stitched arcs across driveways. The sun threw a last brass-colored rectangle across the enclosure cage. The green tag caught it and flashed like a small verdict. The vines curled around the mesh as if they'd always planned to grow that way and had only been waiting for the right sentence to be read. In the garage, the console's hum felt less like work and more like habit. I closed my eyes for the time it takes a breath to fill and empty and let the sound sketch the edges of a quiet evening. Lena sat by the window in the sunroom. Book open, battery untouched. "How was it?" she asked. "Civil," I said. "In the best sense." She smiled. "And the tag, green as a traffic light," I said. "Do not tamper in capital letters." "Good." She turned a page and tapped her finger against the margin. "You know you don't have to keep checking everything every hour." "I know," I said, "but I want to earn the habit of not checking." We ate late at the small table by the door, leftover chicken, a salad that tried and listened to the neighborhood recalibrate. Somewhere down on Alia Circle, a tape measure snapped. On Sycamore, a drill spun politely. When the dishes were done, I opened my laptop to make sure the policy draft had landed in my inbox. A new email at the top waited with its subject line in HOA brand bold, "Special vote 1 month." The body text was mercifully short, a date and a time, the promise of a ballot. The cursor blinked in the corner, patient and pale. I didn't click anything. I didn't need to. The tag outside said enough for one night, and the console agreed. Still, the blink kept its rhythm soft and steady, reminding me that the story had one more page to turn. Smoke curled above the picnic tables, thin blue ribbons against the afternoon sky. The lake glittered as if it had accepted an invitation, too. Children chased frisbees across the grass while neighbors queued for ribs, paper plates bending under sauce and weight. For the first time in years, Lena sat in the sun without a cord at her side, the ventilator battery untouched, a book open on her lap. Her laughter, quiet and round, carried further than the music speakers. The vines had swallowed the cage around the enclosure by now. What once looked like defiance looked designed an architectural choice. Only the green tag showed through glossy and stubborn verified medical exemption, "Do not tamper." Terrence held an envelope with the state seal folded against its crease. He moved between groups with the unease of a man who hadn't rehearsed his newfound authority. Finally, he tapped a plastic cup with a fork. "If I could have your attention for a minute," he said. Chairs scraped the ground. Conversations dimmed into shuffling feet and the hiss of the BBQ pit. Terrence lifted the envelope. "We received this yesterday," he said, "from the governor's office. I'd like to read it aloud." He unfolded the letter paper, catching the light. His voice steadied with each line. "To the residents of Briar Glen Estates, I commend your community for recognizing the importance of transparency and the protection of medically necessary systems. Your revisions to policy ensure that health and safety are not subject to convenience. Let this serve as an example statewide." Signed, he paused. Governor applause rose, hesitant at first, then firm, more than polite, but less than triumph. The governor wasn't here this time, but his words carried the same cameo weight. For once, the gavel didn't matter. The letter did. I let my eyes travel to Alia Circle's ramp couple. Fresh rails gleamed where caution tape once sulked. The husband gave a small salute with his paper plate, his wife grinning over potato salad. Across from them, the Sycamore Court family stood near their porch photo, except now the lift had been reinstated. Their daughter rode it once down the steps as if to prove gravity could cooperate again. Neighbors clapped, not staged, not forced, just relief turned outward. Byron leaned near my shoulder, voice low. "That's what balance looks like. Not a headline. A rail, a lift, a tag." I nodded. And a BBQ. Especially that he said, then moved back to the shade, letting the air carry his verdict. Terrence cleared his throat again. "The policies are posted online," he said. Licensing checks third-party oversight renewal every 2 years. No more gaps. No more unilateral decisions. A neighbor in a fishing hat raised his cup. To fewer memos, more ribs, he said, and laughter followed easy and unsuspicious. I lifted my phone and snapped a photo Lena in the sunlight, the tag gleaming faintly through vines in the corner of the frame. For once, the image didn't need explaining. It carried its own caption. The applause built not for me, never for me, but for a policy written in ink instead of fear. A child tugged at the frisbee stuck in a tree. Parents offered napkins, and the lake kept throwing back the light. For a moment, the HOA logo on the banner above the tables looked less like a threat and more like punctuation. Later, when the food was packed and the sun leaned into evening, Lena touched my wrist. "We can breathe easy tonight," she said. I looked at the console light blinking green through the open garage window, steady as a heartbeat. The hum was background again, not foreground. The vines kept their watch, the tag glinted once more, and I let myself sit without needing to check anything. The lake lapped the shore like it had been practicing patience all these years, waiting for the neighborhood to catch up. For the first time, I thought it had. The last notes of the BBQ still lingered in the air, wood smoke, laughter, and the lake catching the sun like glass. From where I sat, the vines had wrapped the enclosure until the green tag looked less like a warning and more like a promise. What mattered wasn't one resignation, but the way neighbors claimed rails lifts and rules written in ink instead of fear. We learned that balance can return when communities insist on it. Justice isn't loud, it's steady. And tonight, under banners that no longer threatened, I believed we'd built something worth keeping. Share your own HOA experiences in the comments below.